Welcome to the ZNL Podcast, a podcast brought to you by ZN, the OG digital agency in Brussels.
Hello and welcome to this episode of ZNL. I am very happy today to have a special guest, Silvia Cambie. I've known Silvia for many, many years, I would dare say decades. And I'm very excited to have Silvia on the show today because she is a very experienced communicator. She's worked across a range of different projects and disciplines, but she's also had a long career working in tech and in particular in AI. What I really found very interesting is that, for example, she worked on one of the early AI application with IBM called Watson, among other different very interesting projects. And she also writes for the Strategic magazine. So welcome to the show, Silvia.
Thank you, Phil. And it's great to see you. Yeah, we've known each other for many years. It probably dates us, but we have.
Indeed. So you have worked in this tech space and in communication, which is very interesting because a lot of our listeners and viewers come from the communication space, but they are really interested in AI. And one of the big topics that everybody's talking about, it's very confusing, is what is AI? What do we do with it? How do I use it personally? And how do I deploy it in my organization? So can you tell me a little bit about, what was your first encounter with AI? So when did you start understanding, discovering the tools, hearing the words, and what was it about then?
Yes, I'll tell you a bit about my transition from comms to tech. I was working first on social media strategies, like a lot of external communicators. And then I kind of worked on internal social media like Yammer. I worked with Yammer before they were acquired by Microsoft. And then I worked on a social media platform, internal social media platform called Connections that IBM had. That's how I got to work for IBM. And in IBM, I discovered Watson and AI. So IBM was one of the organizations that piloted AI back in the 50s. AI is nothing new. It just has been around for decades. The only reason why it has come to the forefront now, it's because of cloud, big data, mobile devices that produce an enormous amount of data. So when I was in IBM, I got trained in AI, machine learning, natural language processing. I understood how AI works. And I was working on a particular application of AI, which was AI applied to the workplace. So bringing together a lot of the internal channels that we had at the time. It was Yammer, it was email, it was other video conferencing tools, and put in an AI layer, a Watson layer on top of it in order to coordinate the whole thing. And so that, the user could query the application and get the information they wanted without having to switch between different channels. So that was what my baptism of fire with AI. And I developed quite an interest in it, particularly in the more strategic aspect. So AI communicators have been using a lot applications like ChatGPT, generative AI, since it has come on the market in late 2022. That's what we call creation AI. But there is another side to AI, which is curation AI, which is basically the insight that AI can get from information, predict behaviors, predict future developments. Because basically machine learning, the way it works is the machine makes a correlation between a pattern and an outcome. It formulates a hypothesis, it interacts with a human or a system, gets some feedback, integrates that into the next hypothesis, and makes predictions, right? That's why we call AI probabilistic. So its potential for strategic AI it's for strategic communications, strategic AI for comms, for advisory comms, is huge in areas like measurement, crisis management, advisory to senior management or the board. I'll give you an example that I often use, when people ask me, well, how can you use AI and that is not writing text with ChatGPT or creating visuals? I was working on a project with a retail company here in the UK, and they operate a number of warehouses where they have seasonal workers who don't have email IDs. So the way you communicate to them is very much how we communicate to non-desk bound workers, right? With monitors and the likes. But we didn't know whether we would really get them at the spots where they were. So we used surface occupancy data from those warehouses. We applied AI, and we got kind of a prediction of where they were likely to be based on their schedule, on the schedule of their shifts, on the weather conditions, whether they were coming in to work or not. And that was a bit of a better measurement than our gut feeling of where these people ought to be and ought to be reading our comms. And that is an example of how you can use data and AI to basically support what strategic comms has always been around to do, but got kind of lost over the years. The usual, what we used to say in the past, we need a seat at the strategic table, and we need to be talking to senior leaders in companies. Well, this is one of the things that enables us to do that.
Now, when did you come across this? You talked about, your machine learning experience. When was this? Was it in 2020 or 2018 or what?
No, it was in 2015. So when I joined IBM, and we were at those were, believe it or not, Phil, those were the early days of AIs in terms of talking to clients about AI, right? Mm-hmm. So I was going to a meeting in Germany with a colleague, and we were kind of debating, should we talk about AI and Watson? This is so outlandish. What is the client going to say? And that, just 5 years down the line, it just kind of all over the place. Yes, it's kind. I have been fortunate enough to kind of being introduced to the core part of AI. To me, generative AI and ChatGPT, Claude, and the likes, that's just one aspect of what AI can do.
Yeah, I think what happened, with ChatGPT was that it completely brought the word AI into the public consciousness and brought something that existed, that had been developed for a long time, as something that was relevant to everybody, because you could write poems and songs and do things that people could understand. But of course, if you, as you were saying, many projects were using AI extensively before that became a kind of a new story. But I think indeed that transformation has kind of accelerated investments, accelerated change. Now you talked about how perhaps we don't because of that maybe vulgarization of ChatGPT. People have seen, a lot of people still think AI is about text writing or maybe image generation, but basically it's that generative tool. Where do you think people are getting it wrong, or what are they missing in the bigger picture of what AI can and will do in your mind?
I think it's because, as you rightly said, it's the power of OpenAI and Sam Altman behind ChatGPT and the whole campaign that started in 2022. I think what people are not getting right is the fact that AI needs good data, needs different data sources, so an orchestration of data. So you first have to look at the data in your company, but also you have to be very clear about what AI can do for you. It's like, for instance, if you're a bank, if you want to streamline the mortgage application process, then that's one use case, as we say in tech, that you can use. Or if you are in oil and gas and you want to improve the maintenance of your pipelines. I think that Gen AI has done a disservice to the use of core AI, because it has sidetracked a lot of people. So the conversation that we need to have with senior management has become more difficult, because they think that AI is ChatGPT, is creating reports, is summarizing the meetings of board meetings, right? So it has done a disservice, but at the same time, it has created an opportunity. And I do believe that communicators have to inhabit that space.
Yeah, I feel that there's a kind of the Sorcerer's Apprentice kind of problem, the cartoon of Disney where you discover magic and it suddenly overwhelms you. Now, the people who are skeptical about AI often say, look at the hallucinations of AI.
Yeah.
Look at how unreliable it is. You know, it doesn't deliver the same thing every time. It often gives me information that's not strictly accurate. So how can I rely on this? And as you said, it's a probabilistic
Yeah.
tool, which means it's saying this is the most likely outcome with my data set. So how do you use that when you need very accurate information, or you have very important processes that you have to be sure about? How do you answer clients or people when they say, but I can't trust this information, it's only probabilistic and it's never 100% accurate?
I think that's also one of the misconceptions about AI. It is probabilistic, and you don't have yet a result that is 100% perfect. That's the nature of the technology. And you also see, AI is trained; it's not programmed. If I had €1 for every time I hear AI is programmed, we would be going for a very nice lunch, Philip, in Brussels, you and I. So I think that it's, the word training is the issue. You have to explain to clients or to your stakeholders in your company that this is a tool that has to improve with time, but also has to get used to how you use it, what you want to get out of it, the different sources. The hallucination, you have to work probably with your tech provider, because the reasons why the machine hallucinates are there are a lot of reasons, and I find the vendors are not always very open about them. But I think it's really this: you have to train the machine to get used to you. This is, in very simple terms. And I know that it's not an easy sell to people who are used to very traditional computing and systems that you plug in and or you get software from the cloud and off you go. This it's more front loaded, it requires more work, and the AI it has to adjust to you, to your company, to your data, to your way of working, to the results you want to have. And that's why the education part of AI rollout is very, very heavy and very, very important. So you have to educate not just the users, but also the sponsors of the project, senior management, because this is a different technology.
Yeah, and I think another issue is that we've had so much hype, and we're still having every day on LinkedIn, online, you have articles, you can do these amazing things with AI. And they're constantly oversimplifying what's possible and making it sound much easier than it is. So you see all these magical things that you can do with AI, and then you say, okay, how can I apply this specific use case for myself? And you go, okay, that's not exactly it. So I have to reprompt it, and I have to reprompt it, and I have to reprompt it. And you realize that it really takes a lot of skills right now. And I think it's much harder than what we're told and sold. So I think it's a very interesting challenge right now because it is very powerful, but it's actually quite difficult to use it effectively and intelligently. Now, I know one of the areas that you find particularly important is this data analytics, and you wrote about this, how you could use these tools to get better insights into data. Now, I want to ask you, because we just talked about hallucinations. So given that we have to be careful with the accuracy of the data, how can we then rely on AIs to give us really meaningful insights if we're not sure of its accuracy? How do you kind of square that circle?
Yeah, and that's a very difficult question to answer. You have to, it's trial and error, because as I said, it's the nature of the beast, right? So in my experience, hallucination comes a little bit from how the AI engine is trained, how it functions. I think a very close relationship with your vendor, with a tech company that provides your AI is important, because they have to be open with you in terms of what the problems are. And if you remember recently, last month, there was an article about, well, they had to withdraw one version of ChatGPT because of it being too sycophantic. I think it still is, actually. I think they made it like that. That's my very personal point of view, to please the user. Now, and from that, maybe there is some hallucination coming to that. So hallucination has a source, right? And I believe because AI is so poorly understood by the user and by the sponsors of these projects, sometimes the vendors are not completely open about what is happening behind the curtain. So it's a bit of a Wizard of Oz situation still. But so I think being very clear with your vendor and trying to understand what's going on there. I think in terms of data, and our conversation, Phil, was about why communicators should be involved in data. Every time I talk to communicators and I mention data analytics, they sort of big blank, and no, I'm not in IT, I'm not a data scientist, I don't have a background in tech. But I think we're thinking of data in the wrong terms here. Well, data is the fuel for AI, but also it's very important for storytelling, for the work we are doing, comms supporting the rollout of AI and other technologies. So to give an example, when I do comms for change management and the rollout of systems, we always ask the sponsor of the project, what does good look like at the end of the project? What do you want to have? And we ask for them to express this with data. How many users you want to have in your first pilot, how many people are on that pilot and they're using the technology successfully, or how many hours of the day are they saving because of this technology. And then you can weave that data into a story that you play back to the sponsors, to senior leaders. But for that to happen, you have to work closely with the people rolling out the AI, from the CIO office or the data chief officer office. So it's really a repositioning of the comms function a little bit, to collaborate with this function more closely and to understand what goes into AI, but more importantly, what comes out and what we can use for our storytelling and for our communication. So an area that was in the past a bit of, no, I'm not going to go there. Now we do have to go there.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. A couple of points that I thought you made were very interesting. The sycophantic AI, which has become obviously a phenomenon, which is the AI is trying to be nice and trying to please you. At the same time, there was an article, I think just a few weeks ago, a new version of Claude, the AI from Anthropic, which basically was blackmailing the testers. They were red teaming the the new versions to see how far they could push it. So red teaming is when you try to provoke it, and it used data on the programmer who threatened to switch it off to blackmail these people. So it's either sycophantic or psychopathic. So we have a very interesting range of psychological conditions, right, which I think we still need to figure out. So I think the AI, the other point you made is that you have to talk to your vendor. I agree with you, but I also think that, many vendors, including the companies developing the technologies, do not fully understand what it can do, what the limits are, because of this probabilistic machine learning kind of technology. So they will say, look, this is the thing, these are the benchmarks, these are the things that we've done, but they can't tell you this is what's going to happen under these conditions. That's why they're putting it out in the world, and then you're seeing what people are doing.
Yeah.
I think what's very interesting is that you need to be actively learning and testing the use cases,
absolutely,
asking for your vendors. But I find that the vendors are sometimes, with the same knowledge that you have, because the new version of ChatGPT, they haven't seen it more than you. So they start, you get it and you start testing it. And the key thing is to get your use cases. Now, one of my favorite use cases for the moment is using AI for deep research. So this is the function that ChatGPT, Gemini, even Grok, but I would say a different way, and Perplexity all have. So you have a button called deep research or more research or some version of that. And it then goes much deeper into the web. It searches websites, it creates code to even search certain things. And it gives you some very interesting insights. And it genuinely saves you hours or days of research, because if you say, look, can you research the 20 sites that sell this or talk about this, etc. So I think there's a very practical use case. But then you end up with these 20-page reports with all the references and things like that. And it's almost so easy to do that you might end up with 5-6 reports of 20 pages, and you then become slightly overwhelmed by the amount of information. And that takes me back to the question on data analytics is, how do you advise people to find the information that really matters? Because even with these new tools, we can get even more information. But the problem is to be able to filter what in that information is a relevant signal. And for that, I'm not sure the AI can give you that answer unless you can prompt it. So how do you go about doing that when you have all these massive reports? And this
I think you're absolutely spot on. It's not a matter of AI. I think it's a matter of the work you need to do before you apply the AI. First of all, have a very, very clear ask or use case, if you like. So what do you need this report for, right? So, and then you have to go and try, and because what you're describing, Phil, is it's creation AI because it creates a report, but it's also curation because it goes and analyzes a lot of sources and basically brings together different sources, probably external, but also internal from your enterprise. So in that sense, if you have an ask that is related to some problem that you want to solve in your company, then there you have to go and talk to the data people and clean the data and prepare the data for that use case, for that research. And many times it doesn't happen because they think, well, AI isn't a panacea, so we'll push this into the AI and let's see what comes out, right? And then that 25-page long report comes out that is not, you can't really use. So you look at that research piece, not so much from the output point of view, but from the input point of view. And think about what you need that for and what you want to go into that, right? So I think that maybe that question and will be answered a bit more efficiently by AI agents. So when agentic AI is a bit more advanced, when we have agents that can coordinate, right? You have one agent that searches the web, another agent that has an API and goes into your ZN database and gets the info that it needs, another agent that can organize maybe interviews with people you need to talk to add information. So that orchestration will be a better way of doing that research. So what you described, the 25-page report, to me is a stepping stone, is a step towards that better product, that better use of AI through agentic AI.
Yeah, and I have to say, when you do the research, I think the key thing is that you just have to check it, and you have to make sure that you've double checked the sources. I have to say, especially on ChatGPT, I find it pretty reliable. I actually haven't seen many
better than before,
on these reports. Sometimes it kind of misses the point, but sometimes it's brilliant, and there are insights there that you think, wow, you found these series of insights and trends, and you found an article, and you found a kind of industry shift, and then you wrote a conclusion that actually makes sense for what I'm trying to do. So I found, but it's interesting because sometimes I find exceptional insights, and sometimes like you keep missing the point, and so saying like you're not quite there. So you're having your interactions with multiple AIs to try to say. So when we do a deep research, we actually conduct multiple prompts. So and the prompt, creating the prompt, which again, is not one prompt. You write the prompt, you say, help me to write the prompt, and then you get to a good prompt. Then you put that prompt in different AI tools, and you might even add different data in that prompt, saying, look at this piece of research or this document, and then do the research. And interestingly, you're going to get quite different things each time. So there is I think it's still an experimental approach where you have to say, look, I'm going to create 5 or 6 of them, then I'm going to evaluate them. And as you said, it then gets better. So the inputs are critical. And I think
absolutely.
And we need to learn to get better at inputs. And I see conversations with your AI to say, okay, I've asked you this. What do you think? Okay, no, not quite there. And you have this incredibly long thread, which you can't turn into a magical prompt. It has to be this back and forth to get to the point. Now, when we have these conversations with AI, we talked about the AI being sycophantic or psychotic or psychopathic. But one thing that I think everybody is kind of experiencing is something you mentioned, that these AIs are looking increasingly like humans or some kind of independent beings. And I know that this is something that you're concerned about. Tell me a bit more. Why? What is your worry there?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I was reading about it months ago, and I was reading about Replica, where the site where you can create a bot that looks like a man, a woman, a cat, and it's for like using as a friend or as more as support or having a romantic relationship with. And they do have more than 30 million users, right? And it's this kind of need for a bot, like anthropomorphication of a bot, and need to have a relationship with a bot is a global phenomenon. I was reading a report from China where they were saying that the use of these bots and the people having relationships with bots and not with humans anymore is increasing as a phenomenon. And that's because people are lonely, are isolated. In China, they calculated in 2024, the average Chinese has had 18 minutes of face-to-face interactions every day versus 5+ hours spent online every day. So the fact that we are interacting much more with technology, with AI and with bots is replacing our relationships with our other human beings. And I was thinking, from a sort of sociological point of view, this is interesting. And then I had a conversation the other day with a senior communicator. She told me that she's creating a bot for their intranet for employees to get answers to questions like payroll details, vacation information, corporate news. And she said, I have to make it look like a person. And I looked at her and I thought, why? And she said, well, because otherwise they don't want to talk to this thing. They don't have a relationship. They can't relate to it. And I said, well, it's about the AI and how good it is and this, the info that I can get. And she said, no, we have to make it, she didn't use the word cuddly, but I could see it in her eyes. That's a word that she was trying to not to mention. And so I thought that's what it made me really think, that maybe this is something that people need to and to kind of relate to AI better. And I don't have an answer for this, but I know that this is a challenge we will have to face, because going forward, we will have to, when we start a project, we will have to have put together teams that are composed of humans and agents, right? And so those agents, maybe the human beings in your team will want them to look like people. So you'll have to give them anthropomorphic features. I don't have an answer for that, but I think that's something we will have to think about.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not as worried in a professional environment, but I understood recently there was an interview with Mark Zuckerberg where he said he expected people would increasingly have AI friends. And because of the problem of the loneliness epidemic, he said, we can fill that gap by offering people AI friends who can be, different characters that they choose and that have the personalities that they set up, and that they can kind of fill that vacuum, which I think sounds like a terrifying idea when you see what social media can do to relationships. If you basically shift from human relationships to social media relationship, but imagine if you substitute human relationship with AI. I think AI has the potential to be much more powerful. So I believe that first of all, I think it will happen because
Yes.
the tools are there and they work. And I think it's already happening now. But we need to think as parents and as responsible individuals, how can we try to separate AIs playing a different role from, they don't answer the loneliness epidemic. We're also seeing AIs being used in therapy. There's been some studies. I have a friend who's a therapist, and she did a paper on the subject. And I think there's a positive angle to this, because for some people who don't have the time or the money to go and engage with a therapist, it could be a good conversation to have, at 3:00 in the morning if you have some anxiety. But it obviously does not play the same role and cannot have the same guardrails as a therapist. And then, of course, we have the dating stories, people falling in love with the AI, the story of the US kid who fell in love and committed suicide, allegedly because the AI had encouraged him to do that. So I think we're going to see some really big challenges that are effectively already there, but that we have to start addressing very openly. I believe that in companies, I think it's a question more of where they fit in your organization and how you can kind of leverage them effectively. Now, in terms of how you personally use AI, what is it that you use on a daily basis? Are you using a combination of tools? Are you using it mainly for writing, for inspiration, or are you using agentic AI? What's your personal use of this?
So for my personal use, for my writing, I use ChatGPT. I have come to the conclusion that that's the one that works best for me. So I use ChatGPT. But for project work, I use different versions of applications that are developed for my clients' needs, for research, for risk management, for the different areas in which they are applying AI. So that is more the kind of curation side, right? And you might have a tool that does research in HR, in talent management, and has an AI built into it that processes information that comes from different sources, from the company, from external sources, and recommends the best strategy going forward in terms of talent acquisition, in terms of acquiring talent in new markets. So that is more AI that is built into products that are specific per project. But for my personal use, I use ChatGPT. It's kind of a relationship that I developed. At the start I was using it for research, and I wasn't using it for writing much. Probably because I come from print media. My roots are in journalism, and that's how I came to communications. And I was a bit. I had this. I had to let go of my ego and start using ChatGPT for real writing. And now I am doing it. So I write a paragraph. I check. I look at ways how it can be changed, anything we need to improve, anything we need to add. And it's really that improvement that was really going against my pride a lot. But I can see that it's kind of a collaboration, for the lack of a better word. So I needed to do this also because the engines will evolve in the future. And so if you don't dip your toes into a tool like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and you start doing that work, you will be left behind in the future. So I think that it's very much. You mentioned one aspect earlier that I believed is very important, which is the interaction with the engine and with the bot. A lot of people, when they get an answer that is not exactly what they wanted, they think, "Oh, I'm going to go write that myself. It's not really interesting." But you have to interact with it. You have to tell them what you think. You have to tell them what your style is all about. You have to give it some samples, so what you've done in the past, even in the distant past, so that the machine learns about you and learns about what you really need. And I find that sometimes that's not really done.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that the worst thing you can do is just say, hey, can you write an article on this topic?
Yeah.
And then it writes it out, and then you think, oh my God, this is so generic, this is terrible. Mm-hmm. So I think what I tend to do is I say, look, I'd like to write about this point, that point, and these arguments. So I kind of write a very bad element, but just all the ideas. Then it comes out, and then I edit, and then I go back in cycles. And so I think it's just like a writing process. The great thing is it's like an editor that is kind of cleaning up the thing. Right. And then you can say, and in the end, often I just say, okay, I'm gonna take that, but I'm gonna lose that whole thing because this bit I don't like. It's just not getting what I'm trying to say. But the rest is okay. It's clean, because I always, worry about some typos or some grammatical issues, and at least that you don't have to worry about. But so when you go into a company, and I'm talking especially about small companies, and you have a communication background, so think about people in communication functions. What do you think is the biggest challenge that these people face as a company or as an organization in starting to adopt AI tools? And what is perhaps the best place for them to go, the resources where you think they can learn about this? I know these things keep changing, but I don't know if you have any go-to places. So what are the challenges, and where can people go to learn about this?
So let's talk from the point of view of a communicator, right? Because that's kind of those are our origins, and that's our audience. I think the challenge there is that they think that a lot of communicators still think that AI projects are a domain where IT and data scientists should lead and not them. They are not clear about their role. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you've seen a study that was released recently by the Global Alliance. So they surveyed companies about AI governance, AI ethics, and the results were that 39% of the respondents, 39 of the organizations have an AI governance framework. Now, only 8% of those companies have their comms function leading those AI governance efforts. So it's less than 10%. It's again because they think, this is an IT thing. It's not my thing. But communicators have a lot of knowledge in terms of users, in terms of behaviors, patterns, the history of the company, the different sources of data, different types of projects have gone on over the years. And they have a very important role to play, not only in the rollout of the technology, but also in the and hence telling the story of the technology, but also in creating those guardrails and creating governance and creating ethics frameworks. It's very important that communicators step up to the plate and play an active role, a strategic role. I think a problem that communicators have also is that often in companies, AI projects, AI pilots are very disenfranchised. They're kind of happening in different corners and nobody is coordinating. So some work that I've been doing is really about creating AI centers of excellence where that work is coordinated. And it's, so you have AI training, you have AI creation of AI guidelines for governance and ethics, but also you have a kind of you create a role for a communicator that is communicating, but also bringing those stories together. So it's kind of peer-to-peer learning, and it's no longer threatening from somebody in one part of the company that hasn't used AI, thinking, oh, they're doing it over there. They're doing it, it seems successfully. I don't know if I can do the same. So you take away the fear because you create this peer-to-peer dynamic in this centers of excellence. And I really, truly believe that communicators have an important role to play, and it's a strategic area where communicators need to be.
And in terms of resources, is there a place that you go to learn about this? I know OpenAI has done an academy. Microsoft has some things. Is there, where do you tend to gravitate to learn, to keep up with AI or to learn about it?
So you'll be surprised, Philip. I go to LinkedIn Learning a lot.
Right.
I think that it's got some great resources. I was discussing a problem with a client the other day, and I went on it and I found a framework that I think would work. Also, IBM has amazing training resources. You can get an accreditation, but also if you don't want an accreditation, you can do a series of them. They're very easy to digest, very well done, also from a comms point of view. So you can find them on YouTube. And obviously, I for communicators, and I give now a plug to FIR and Shell Holtz and Neville Hobson, because Neville is an old friend of mine and we used to be colleagues in IBM. I think that they do discuss a lot of issues that are very relevant, particularly from that strategic and governance point of view. So you get a lot of ammunitions from FIR that you can use in your conversations as a communicator, convincing your managers that you need to step up and you need to have a better strategic role in AI governance.
Yeah, no, I think that's very good advice. And I think what we need now, I've always been a fan of learning, which I call hyper learning in the hyper thinking framework. The idea of making daily time for learning new things. through podcasts, but I also like the way you talked about LinkedIn Learning, because that gives you a more structured series. So it's not just listening to somebody saying, hey, here's the latest trends, but it's saying, okay, if you want to learn how to do this, you're going to need several sessions with a method that we put
Yes.
together. I think it needs very good advice. And I think that in the environment we are now, we have no choice, because
No.
there's just no other way to learn, and you cannot wait for 3 or 6 months until some consultant gives you a workshop. You really need to educate yourself. I'm listening to a podcast called Everyday AI, which is not a bad kind of highlights of new tools as well as some practical implementations. So I think very, very interesting. Now, you told me that one of the things that I think you're really excited about in the future is quantum computing. And I want to ask you about that, because typically in the AI conversation, people are always talking about, general artificial intelligence. This is the moment when people are going to, the robots are coming and they're going to be smarter than everyone, and it's going to change the world. So do you think that's perhaps not the most exciting threshold, but you think quantum computing is more interesting? Tell me a bit about that.
I think, Phil, I think that people talk about AGI because it's easier to digest than quantum computing.
Right.
I personally think, and I might be very wrong, that quantum computing, it's here, but it will evolve faster than we think and get to a level that will enable it to be more widely used. I think
So tell us,
sooner.
what is
Yes.
quantum computing? I'm sure most people watching this will not know what
Yeah.
it means. They'll have an idea, but tell us a little bit, how, in layman terms, how can you explain what it is and why does it matter?
Yeah, so quantum computing is based on the principles of quantum science. So in classical computing, conventional computing, one bit is either 1 or 0. In quantum computing, a qubit is 1 and 0 at the same time.
Quantum physics.
And exactly, and that's thanks to a feature of quantum mechanics called superposition, which you think of a coin. When you're spinning a coin, while the coin is spinning, it's heads and tails at the same time. So that's a qubit. And you can imagine the number of calculations that you can do with a qubit being one bit of information and another bit of information at the same time. There are other principles in quantum science that enable these very high level calculations with very large numbers and enormous amounts of data, but that's highly technical. But the interesting thing about quantum computing is that because they can process so much data and much faster than other computers, they can break combinations that are used for cyber. They can find different new molecules. They can elaborate on models for risk management, for instance, that are much more complex than before. So it is basically a different type of processing information that is based on what happens at subatomic level, so with quantum particles, and will really revolutionize how computing works. Now, the problem at the moment is that quantum computers are very expensive. They have to be they have to be kept in very special conditions, very low temperatures, close to absolute zero, so colder than in outer space. They have to be in buildings with very stable foundations because they can't be subject to noise, vibrations, and so they're only a few companies that operate them. IBM operates a quantum computer that you can access through the cloud. And if you are a developer, you can already write quantum algorithms and process data with a quantum computer. But so this is where quantum is at the moment. But I think that it's coming. It's probably coming faster than we think, and it will be a total revolution of how we process data.
Right. So my knowledge of quantum mechanics was the Schrodinger's cat, which is my
Yes.
favorite analogy ever, which is that a cat in a box, you don't know if the cat is alive or dead if there's a radioactive component in the box until you open the box.
Right.
So it's in a state, I think, of superposition. So it's two things at once. But just, from my understanding, as I said, not from a deep technical point of view, what you're saying is effectively we're talking about a incredibly powerful computer, which will be exponentially more powerful than what we have, which presumably will then accelerate the deployment of AI tools since they need a lot of processing power, and perhaps in turn help find new technical solutions to make these processes even faster. Is that the kind of, is there a link between
Yeah, that's right.
and
Absolutely.
the AI, which then feeds into some kind of loop where the computers become infinitely faster and more powerful in a very short period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. The quantum computing can do the calculations that are needed for AI applications, right? And AI can process data that then gets fed into quantum computers. And so it's kind of this sort of multiplication of power in two different areas, and that you can then combine. So what interests me is that really we really don't know where the tech sector will be heading to in the future. I think that also with AI, there is a lot we don't understand. And I think that, I like to quote Geoffrey Hinton, who got a Nobel Prize and was is kind of a bit of a quite skeptical about AI. And he's saying that for the first time in the history of the human race, we'll have something that is more intelligent than us, and how we will be able to deal with that. So I think that, without painting doomsday scenarios, I think it is important to think about the relationship between humans and AI, and also systems like quantum that will multiply the power of technology and enhance it remarkably. So I think that, again, going back to our audience, communicators will have to play that role in the future of co-shaping guardrails and thinking about the role of the user, the role of the human in the whole scenario.
I suspect the communication teams are not yet ready for a quantum communication presentation, because I think that'll probably be like your AI initial presentations where people's like, what the hell are you talking about? Now, with all this complexity and all these changes, when you meet people, young graduates, or even, and I think this is, getting even more interesting, if you begin your studies, what is your advice? Because some people are thinking, and there's been recent publications in different studies saying, graduate jobs are starting to decline. Are we seeing that AI impact now? Are certain professions, certain white-collar professions, going to be significantly hit in the next couple of years? So what do you do when you're beginning your career or when you're beginning your studies to, protect yourself against the impact of AI, or try to turn that into an advantage? What is your advice to young people?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that's a question that is a bit difficult to answer just yet. What I would say is, if you definitely combine your comm studies with technology, but also with some studies like sociology and psychology that are really about how humans function. Because I think that is something that going forward will always be important in terms of who uses these technologies. I know there will be some professions that will be heavily impacted, like professional services, legal services, and all the more pedestrian aspects of it, will be impacted and in a way that will probably cost jobs. But I think that it's really having that combo, right? Comms, tech, and studies of human behavior, psychologies, social dynamics. I think it's a bit of a insurance policy. I hope that would be my recommendation to someone who's going to university and wants to study communications.
Yeah, I think it's very, I mean, as you said, we don't really know yet, but for example, certain hard skills in terms of computer programming are going to become less useful. And we're already seeing replacements of some of these skills. So it's not so much the coding itself, but it's understanding the architecture and being able to think around it, which is why people are talking about those skills like sociology, philosophy, analyzing meaning to be able to
Right.
structure your prompts. So I think there's a very interesting debate. I've seen people saying that, in fact, the non-scientific degrees are almost becoming more interesting because
Yes,
they give you the
indeed.
perspective, and then you can get that information on the technical things from the AI because they're much easier to find.
Yeah, indeed.
So I think very interesting moment. I don't think we have the answer, but I think people have to think about this deeply because they are going to, if they're starting their studies, they're not going to exit them in the same world they enter.
No, absolutely.
And I also think universities are not really thinking about this deeply enough because they are just trying to slightly adapt their courses, but not saying maybe we need to change the way we to fully integrate AI into what we teach, which is another conversation.
Yeah.
Now we have time for your recommendation. Can you tell me what book, movie, or podcast you want to recommend our audience to?
Recommendations of the week.
Right. So my book, as you would expect, is about quantum computing. So it's Quantum, a Guide for the Perplexed by Jim Alcalde, who's a professor at the University of Surrey here in the UK, and is a physicist. It's a great book because it's got no math in it. I'm not very good at math, but it's got physics, and it's very he's got a very nice colloquial style and really helps to understand the whole science behind quantum computing.
Fantastic. And another one?
So, and in terms of another book I would like to recommend, it's actually about the story of ChatGPT, and it's more about the story of OpenAI and Sam Altman. The whole drama in late 2023 when he was kind of almost ousted. It's quite a dark book, so if you are not in a good mood and it's not a sunny day in Brussels, you might don't start it on that day. But it's very interesting. It's by Karen Hale, and it's an unauthorized story of OpenAI. So OpenAI and Sam Altman did not want to work with her, which is kind of interesting. That's why I wanted to read it. But it will also, it will give you some things to think about, in particular about the ethical aspects of AI, as I was saying before.
And I think you had a podcast recommendation as well?
Yes. So I already gave FIR a plug earlier on, but what I would like to recommend is another podcast, which is All There Is by CNN anchor and journalist Anderson Cooper.
Right.
I really like his style, his journalistic style. He's very empathetic. And I think for communicators, we always have to speak to stakeholders and conduct interviews. And so that is something, it's almost like a master class in how to do it. And I really rate Anderson very high.
Excellent. Indeed. And FYR, as you said, is a very interesting resource. We had Neville on the show. So very good to hear their insights. I would like to recommend an article which was published actually in January and has gone viral, called Philosophy Eats AI, and it's by MIT professors, and basically it talks about what we were discussing, which is the importance of these new skills or old skills in this new world, which is about thinking, understanding concepts, understanding philosophical tools that you can then apply to your kind of use of AI tools. And I think it's surprising interesting, because it's true that the reality is that what we need to do is better master data and insights, and turn data into signals and signals into insights. And for that, you need a framework. And philosophy is all about giving you mental frameworks, which are another way to talk about prompts. So interesting article and story. So I think that's all we have time for. Silvia, it's been fantastic to hear your experience, your insights. I think we now feel that we need to dive into quantum computing a bit more to see what's the next stage in the amazing evolution of technology that took place in the last couple of years, but obviously in the last decade as well. Thank you very much. See you online, and stay connected.
Thank you, Phil.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the ZNL podcast. Did you like it? If so, please share it on your social media, subscribe, and give us a comment. We will see you again on the next episode. Until then, remember, stay always one step ahead.